All right, let's go back to Major Garrett on the floor.
Lindsay, I want to read to you a Truth Social post from the former president. I'll cut to the chase. He has selected J.D. Vance as his running mate for the 2024 presidential campaign. Let me read this Truth Social post in toto. Quote, after lengthy deliberation and thought and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator J.D. Vance of the great state of Ohio. Continuing, direct quotes. J.D. honorably served our country in the Marine Corps, graduated from Ohio State University in 2 years, summa cum laude, and is a Yale Law School graduate, where he was the editor of the Yale Law Journal and president of the Yale Law Veterans Association. J.D.'s book, Hillbilly Elegy, became a major bestseller and movie, and it has championed the hardworking men and women of our country. J.D. had a very successful business career in technology. Again, I'm quoting this Truth Social post from the former president. And finance, and now during the campaign will be strongly focused on the people he fought so brilliantly for, the American workers and farmers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Minnesota, and far beyond. There you have it. On Truth Social, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, officially announcing that J.D. Vance, 39-year-old senator from the state of Ohio, 1.5 years in the United States Senate, will be his running mate in the 2024 campaign.
Major, you had mentioned that he is a relatively political newcomer, 1.5 years in the Senate. We, of course, are familiar with his book that turned into the very popular movie. What do we know about his credentials that make him ready for the moment today?
Well, first and most importantly, he was able to patch up his differences with former President Trump. Anyone who does a quick internet search will find in 2016, not only was J.D. Vance critical of former President Trump, then a candidate for the Republican Party nomination for the first time in 2016, he was acidically critical of former President Trump, describing him in one article as potentially America's next Hitler, describing his particular rhetoric about helping the world class as rhetorical heroin. Highly critical of former President Trump seeking the Republican nomination in 2016. Those days are gone. And J.D. Vance has said publicly many times, the movement is larger than I thought it was, and it's time for me to suck it up and join this movement. And since he made that decision, as he prepared to run for the Senate in Ohio and won the endorsement of former President Trump, an endorsement, by the way, that catapulted him to the top of a very contested Republican primary and made him not only the nominee, but the future senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance has been not only the most stalwart, dependable, but most aggressive defender of former President Trump's approach on policy, politics, and even rhetoric. And for that reason, he rose to the top of this list and now has been chosen by the former president as his running mate in this campaign.
Just reiterating the fact that Vance has been in Trump's corner, making that appeal on television. In fact, he was just on Face the Nation with our own Margaret Brenner recently, and he was vigorously defending the fact that the former president needed immunity to do his job, as he believed, as a future president. Of course, in the wake of that decision from the Supreme Court, he has defended the former president when it comes to January 6th. And he obviously came, as many in the nation did, after the attempted assassination on Saturday, to his corner, to his defense, actually posting on Twitter and alleging that it was the current president's own rhetoric that led us there, saying the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. J.D. Vance on Twitter saying, on July 13th, just 2 days ago, the night of the attempted assassination, that rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. Of course, we know President Biden has tried to cool the temperature on both sides. Let's go back to you, Major, as we continue to watch the roll call here at the RNC with this major news of Trump picking J.D. Vance as his running mate.
And it's also worth pointing out that with this pick, former President Trump is signaling that what he wants on this ticket and what he wants for the future of the Republican Party is absolute cohesion with the Trump approach to policy and politics. J.D. Vance is the face of the next generation of Trumpism and Trumpism within the Republican Party. He wants to be that face, and now being chosen as former President Trump's running mate will be the choice, will be the face, rather, of that new Republican Party after former President Trump, should he be elected to a second term. I want to bring in, please, if I could, our political director, Finn Gomez. Finn, it's squeeze in here. Yeah. Make sure we got plenty of room. We're all on the camera. Good. It's all great. We've got the right tie and everything.
That's right. That's right.
Finn, share with the audience your thoughts about J.D. Vance.
I think there was a lot of speculation that it would be J.D. Vance in the last few days. We did see, we had one of our reporters, Shauna Mazzell, out in Cincinnati, Ohio. We saw like a heavy security detail over the last couple of days, especially after the terrible events that occurred in Pennsylvania. We saw, a really heavy security detail, something we did not see with some of the other contenders. But I think with J.D. Vance, as you said, it's somewhat of a legacy pick as well. This is Trump can only be in for one term, as we know. He already served one term, as we know. So, this is someone who can take the MAGA reins, as you said. And if you recall, back in 2016, the Hillbilly Elegy was the book that he wrote. And it was awarded, highly heralded, and it really almost served as a blueprint and sort of a textbook to understand the base that helped propel Trump to that victory in 2016.
Essentially, for those who are not familiar with it, Hillbilly Elegy tells the story about J.D. Vance's extended family, and is the story of economic isolation, seeing industry and economic opportunity drift slowly away from many parts of Appalachia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and also, and he writes very compellingly, movingly, painfully about how that sense of economic isolation, the receding of economic opportunities led to bad decisions, addiction and other things, other problems that he said were not only troubles for his family, but for many of the people he knew in the region he grew up in. Yet, at that time when Hillbilly Elegy was being celebrated, J.D. Vance then said, Trump doesn't know anything about this. His rhetoric speaks to these people, but they're going to be let down by former President Trump, then a candidate seeking the nomination in 2016. As I mentioned a moment ago, he called his rhetoric rhetorical heroin.
Rhetorical heroin, yeah.
Those days, as I mentioned a moment ago, Finn, they're gone, and they are now connected at the hip politically, and in a few hours here on the convention floor, I believe we are expecting unanimous acclamation of this convention and the delegates, former President Trump's running mate.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note, he is a senator of Ohio. He's a junior senator of Ohio. There has been some softening in support for President Biden in those important Rust Belt states, in those blue wall states that he needs to win to get back, to win re-election.
Right.
And I think strategically, the Trump people think this is something I've been told this, that they believe that they can really do well, and I think with J.D. Vance, they feel they can do even better.
Let's break this down for the audience. Right now, former President Trump leads in the polls. He has an electoral map advantage. That is a fact. And the one strong remaining electoral path for President Biden to win re-election is dependent, 100% dependent on Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It is no accident that in his Truth Social post announcing J.D. Vance as the running mate, former President Trump listed those states. You can bet, and I can bet, Finn, that J.D. Vance is going to be circulating throughout those states relentlessly in this campaign. And we know that the Ohio delegation is coming up next. If it's all right with the control room, why don't we go down and listen to the floor in this moment? Let's go. Let's go to the floor.
Iowa, 79 delegates.
Madam Secretary Alex Triantafilou, Chairman of the Ohio Republican Party. I stand here today with my friend Bernie Moreno, who's going to retire forever, politician Sherrod Brown, and deliver a win to the United States Senate. We proudly cast our 79 votes for President Donald J. Trump
and J.D. Vance.
Pursuant to the announcement of the delegation and the rules and procedures of this convention, Iowa, 79 votes, President Trump. America, Samoa, 9 delegates.
So we heard Finn, we heard from the Ohio delegation, not only the delegate votes for former President Trump, formulaic, and then the call, hey, and J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
It's part of the electric moment here. The delegates on that floor are getting the information, and they just heard it called out, sort of officially, sort of semi-officially. It's an exciting moment.
It is, and I think that even prior to this moment, I mean, speaking to some of the delegates on the floor and speaking to some delegates just arriving over the last couple of days, you know, there is a sense, this palpable sense that they feel that they've turned a corner in the race. They feel there's momentum for Donald Trump. Frankly, after the debate in Atlanta and even after the events in Pennsylvania, they feel that they have this sense of momentum. We've been hearing from some of the delegates who have been repeating that now sort of very famous phrase, if you will, from Donald Trump after he was injured when he was shot at the attempted assassination. When he turned to the cameras and said, "Fight, fight, fight," and you're hearing that. You're hearing that through on the floor. That it's breaking out sort of.
And it'll be interesting, Finn. That we have, by the way, just to keep everyone track of what's going on the floor, 3 more states to work through the roll call process. But it'll be interesting, Finn, for all of us to sift how that message of fighting is conveyed rhetorically.
Right.
J.D. Vance jumped right into the fray in the immediate hours after the assassination attempt on former President Trump, essentially saying the rhetoric of the left brought us to this traumatic and potentially lethal moment.
Right.
Lots of other Republicans held back and didn't and now there's been a call from the top of the Trump campaign,
yes,
from former President Trump himself and others, Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader on the Republican side, to say, no, let's bring it down. Right. What will J.D. Vance sound like here? What will others sound like as they talk about the fight? What is the fight about? What is the fight for? And who is that fight against? I'm going to be sifting, as everyone here will be, how personal that is or non-personal that is. Is it policy? Is it personality? Is it names? Is it party? Is it ideology? What is it?
No, I think that's a great point. And we did confirm that the president and the former president and senior members of his campaign have told the organizers, have told the speakers to tone down the tenor following Pennsylvania. Tone it down. We don't need that rhetoric. We want to focus on unifying the party. And I think that's something that you will likely hear from J.D. Vance when he does address this crowd later this week. But you're right. Like, how is that going to play? It's playing well here on the delegate floor, with delegates on the floor. We know that, right? He's speaking, frankly, to the choir, right? But outside in those battleground states, in some of those states where that rhetoric may not be as accepted, like, how does that happen? So, but I do think that.
Finn, let's listen to the floor. The process is about to wrap up.
Florida. Florida, 125 delegates.
Madam Secretary and everybody in this great city, on behalf of our entire family and on behalf of the 125 delegates in the unbelievable state of Florida, we hereby nominate every single one of them for the greatest president that's ever lived, and that's Donald J. Trump, hereby declaring him the Republican nominee for President of the United States of America.
Pursuant to the announcement of the delegation and the rules and procedures of this convention, Florida, 125 votes, President Trump.
So bring your good time and your laughter too. We gonna celebrate your party with you. Come on. Celebration.
Over the top, you see it on the big screen here in Fiserv Forum. That is the Republican National Committee and attendant delegates' way of signaling to the nation and to the world that former President Donald Trump, for the third consecutive Republican convention, is the nominee of the party to seek the presidency in 2024. And that process was brought to dramatic conclusion by the Trump family. Eric, Don Jr., and Laura Trump, all there representing the Florida delegation. And we should note that the pick of J.D. Vance on the ticket for former President Trump is an internal victory for Don Trump Jr., a fierce advocate, very close to J.D. Vance, who'd been suggesting to his president, not to the former president and his father, for months that J.D. Vance was the best pick.
Right, he's been the biggest lobbyist, biggest champion, his biggest cheerleader. And if you recall, in 2016, it wasn't really until the family met with Mike Pence and his family before Donald Trump finally decided that it was going to be Mike Pence. Mike Pence wrote about it in his book, in his memoir, and it was really that moment, but it was really the approval of the family. And so when we heard that J.D. Vance was being really championed by Donald Trump Jr. and his family, and it was a good indicator for that was a good likely pick, that it was going to happen.
No doubt, a very big moment for the Trump family, and we should remind ourselves, and this is something that everyone will evaluate, and history will take very careful note of. For politics and former President Trump, now the nominee officially of the Republican National Party, it's a family affair.
It's a family affair.